Aaaction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of Paul's Old-Time Classic Movies. And this is a podcast where we review pretty much movies before 1980. I know for some people, they'll be like, that's not classic, but we're a new generation. And so, honestly, a lot of people don't see movies before 1980. But with streaming and everything now, we want to highlight films that obviously there's new ones that come out. We have another podcast for that. Check out that podcast. But this podcast is specifically focused on movies before 1980 because there's still a lot of great movies that we haven't seen. And as a guy that's been to film school, there's a million movies that you watch, and then there's still movies that you're like, man, I hear people talk about them, but I still never seen them. So that's what the focus of this podcast is. And last week we saw Great Waldo Pepper starring Robert Redford. And this week we're going to focus on Marathon Man, which stars Dustin Hoffman. We see what's his name? I completely lost it.
You got Roy Scheider.
Well, Roy Schneider's in it, awesome, and then
Laurence Olivier,
but William Devane, and a lot of us contemporaries will know William Devane. He does Gold commercials, but we've never actually seen him in a film, and so it was awesome to actually see William Devane not just talk about Gold, but actually be in a film. I knew he was a good actor. He just had that personality. But I was excited to actually see him in a film and execute it. And he was awesome in this. But William Devane, yeah. All you hear him talking about is investing gold or silver, whatever it is now. I think he changed recently. But this movie's directed by John Schlesinger. He also directed Midnight Cowboy, which is definitely one of his biggest films that people will know him from. And then also written by William Goldman. And for many contemporaries, William Goldman is known. He's a writer, so he's not just a screenplay writer. He actually writes these novels. So this film is also written as a novel, but then he wrote Princess Bride, and then he also wrote the screenplays. So he's a rare Hollywood gem where he can write screenplays and novels like that. Like, this guy's brilliant. One of the best screenwriters of all time.
He's like a Mario Puzo who can write a novel and then write the screenplay as well. Just dropping it.
It's super hard to do, guys. Being a writer myself, to write a novel and then write a screenplay, like, those are two different mediums. Very, very difficult to do. But a Marathon Man came out in 1976. This has a 7.4 IMDb rating, and then this was a super successful film. Had a 64 Metascore, which is it's whatever. Not bad, by the way. 64 is actually not terrible. But budget-wise, $6.5 million, but it grossed worldwide $21 million. So very solid. Was definitely considered a success at the time. But this movie falls into these movies like 3 Days of the Condor, All the President's Men, just these political thrillers, which were so popular in the 1970s. And yeah, so I'm going to start with Drew. Drew, let me get in the premise. Sorry. Let me start with the premise of this film.
Drew. Just 1 second.
And then we'll get into Drew's.
Right.
So the premise of this film is after the shocking murder of his older brother, a New York history student finds himself inexplicably hounded by shadowy government agents on the trail of a Nazi war criminal who is trying to retrieve smuggled diamonds. So, first of all, that's a great premise. Now, I know my brother Pete. I'm gonna go to Pete right away, because Pete, I know you already have some comments on this one. The premise is definitely better than the movie itself, but give your opinions on this movie.
Well, I'll be quick because I'm curious at what Drew has to say about this movie, because Drew appreciates older films more than I do. I don't appreciate older films at all. Well, not at all, but that premise alone is very misleading, because it starts off by saying after the shocking.
That is the premise, though. That's legit the premise.
Okay, but hold on. You asked me to speak. After the shocking murder of his older brother, a New York history student, blah, blah, blah. Do you know how much time it took to get to the shocking murder of his older brother? It
Yeah.
took about 40 minutes.
Welcome to
40
70s.
minutes.
Welcome to
And
70s.
then, you know, but then it talks about inexplicably hounded by a shadowy government agents, these Nazi war criminals who's trying to retrieve smuggled diamonds. This movie has a ton of potential. If it were to be remade nowadays, they tried to do too much in too little space, and
Yeah.
they took way too long to get there. It's a nice movie, and there's some really nice performances and some great scenes, but they tried to do five different things when they should have done two.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Drew. Let's go to
What
Drew.
did
All
you?
right, Drew.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't disagree that there were some strange continuity and like plot issues in this. And it took a little while. However, I will say, what was my favorite thing? And you're right, both of you are
We
right.
doing favorite thing?
The older movies are kind of my lifeblood, and I love 70s movies. I love political thrillers. I love espionage. This is just inject this directly into my veins. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
So, what is my favorite part about this film? The the cinematography and atmosphere of how grimy everything is.
Yeah.
Like it reminded me a little bit of Taxi Driver.
Yeah,
Like
pretty
that
gross.
that opening scene with the two old guys, like one of the most amazing car chases I've like such a different type of car chase where they're like barely bumping each other and up and down the street and just like I don't know. I really liked how real and raw it felt on the New York City streets, even the Paris streets. And it wasn't almost none of it was delicately shot. Like you're almost being
No.
bludgeoned the whole time. Like when they're fighting in the hotel room, no spoilers, but when that scene where there's the fight in the hotel
No,
room.
we can spoil on this one. At this point, if you haven't seen the movie, we know we're watching it. Yeah. So
Okay.
moving forward, Drew, we can spoiler these movies.
Okay. So anyway, the scene with Roy Scheider in the hotel room when when he's getting attacked. I mean, I feel that. And like the guy from across
great scene. That was a great
amazing fight scene. The guy from across the hotel looking in the window and the blood spattering. So I just thought
very,
that
very rear window-ish. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would argue that I think that this is where cinema today, like this movie could have really been elevated with a fight sequence that was actually that looked believable and looked amazing. That fight sequence was really 1970s. It was really bad.
Sure.
Like it just didn't show me anything. In fact, it's like they only show like and then they show the other opposite reaction of the other person. They never show them together.
To your point, Pete, today this movie was shot with an actual Asian fighter that knows choreography, and
Yeah.
then they would spend the time doing the actual choreography. I mean, 100% you're right. Again, what's important when we watch these films is understand context.
Right.
And again, like to your point you made earlier, it's a 70s movie. There's a certain way 70s movies are made, like Star Wars, right? There's a big difference between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And so like you have to understand the differences. And so you have to look at it in a different lens. We're not comparing it to fucking John Wick or something like that.
Of course not, but
better fight scene.
But Star Wars, you can't make a comparison, right? I mean, Star Wars is just it was revolutionary, right? I mean, what it did.
Oh, but the fight scenes are a little bit hacky in that. Like
no, but Empire Strikes Back, technology catches up to 1977 Star Wars. Like the fight scenes, I agree with like what Drew's saying. The fight scenes in Star Wars are pretty terrible when you look back at it today. However, when you look at it in context, you're like, yeah,
Sure, nostalgically, those fight
happening.
scenes
Yeah,
are great. And
I love the fight scenes in Star Wars, but like
granted, I agree.
The lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Darth, it looks like
the worst.
two
The worst.
animatronic
Right.
characters in Disney.
It's very nostalgic, I
Yeah.
admit. And that's probably where I'm coming from. I don't
So,
have
again,
nostalgia with the Marathon Man.
Okay.
And so
Sure.
the fight scene is not a fight scene. It wasn't even a fight scene.
No, of course. Again, we're not here to pick apart.
I was going more to the atmosphere of
All right,
like
go ahead.
everything was raw. Everything like you kind of feel like even within the context of the 70s, it's not the same special effects. You're getting bludgeoned the whole time. The scene that's the screensaver for Paul, like it's just
And
it,
I love how like the blood, like we're seeing the guy across the street again, more rear windowish, but we're
the
seeing
blood
the guy across
splattering
the
against the
way,
curtain.
and then we just see blood spattered.
I love that.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Through the
again,
curtain.
that's working away from obviously like back then they couldn't just do a good ass fight scene, but they were smart and they were getting ways around it. So that's where I'd give it credit.
I want to add one more favorite thing, just sneaky, and I'll pass it over.
Go ahead.
Was reading a little bit afterwards, and Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman's a great actor.
Yeah.
His teeth in this movie took on a life of its own, but unbelievable. But he can also be so annoying. And apparently,
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I
this
don't
picture,
like Dustin
this
Hoffman.
picture of him and Olivier are perfect because there's a quote. He was a method actor, and so he stayed up for like 72 straight hours or whatever. And there's a great quote like that. Laurence Olivier just like kind of looks at him dismissively and says, "Why don't you try acting for once in your life, dear boy?" Like that's so disrespectful and amazing.
Yeah.
You just get out of my face for 2 seconds.
Yeah,
That picture behind you just says it all.
we'll get into it more when we do Dustin Hoffman's top 5 movies. Because it's interesting. It's interesting when you break him down. Look, obviously this guy he's one of the best, right? Like we're not debating that. But he's got a certain way. He's almost like Kevin Costner of the 70s. Like you either like his personality and his style or you don't. Because if you don't like Kevin Costner as a person or as a style, then you're not going to like any other movie because you're just like he's Kevin Costner in all these movies, which is true in a way, right? But you either love Dustin Hoffman slash Kevin Costner, you either like him or you don't, and there's no real nuance, right? Like most of his roles are pretty, like at least in the 70s, they're pretty similar in terms of like it's Dustin Hoffman as this, it's Dustin Hoffman as that. By the way, most actors are like this. So I don't want this to become a debate about actors.
He's a
Denzel
phenomenal.
Washington is the same way, by the way. Like, and Denzel Washington is considered one of the greatest actors of all time. But most films are like it's Denzel Washington as, right? Oh, okay, all right,
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
my man. Okay, okay. But like and most actors are like this. Like, there's very few actors like Daniel Day-Lewis is probably one of them. Maybe Johnny Depp, but most actors are them and then in a role. But there's very few where it's like a legitimate chameleon. So yeah. All right, let's move on to the next category. So did everybody say their favorite thing about this movie? Actually, I don't
No,
think
Drew started that one.
All right, let me go to mine, then we'll go to Pete.
Yeah.
So my favorite movie about this movie is
My favorite movie about this movie.
My favorite thing about this movie.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep it simple, to be honest. I love movies that deal with old time Nazis and Nazis are the criminals. So, you know,
that's a gold mine.
It's a gold mine. So
it never gets old.
Never gets old. 100%.
This is a time period where it's still like super relevant of like the Nazis are still alive. So this is like Indiana Jones. So the first thing I loved about this film was, hey, the Nazis are the criminal. It's an old school Nazi guy. He's got a nickname, you know, the white what the Vice
White Angel.
White Angel.
Vice Angel.
Vice Angel. Yeah. And then there's a great scene at the end that kind of amplifies that. I wish they did more with that scene. I don't know if is that hopefully I don't. Yeah. I wish they did more at that scene because that scene was so powerful.
The last scene?
Yeah,
No,
that goes
no, not
into
the
the
last scene.
it
It's
was
the scene
remade
when he's
today.
walking through the streets and people start recognizing.
Oh yeah.
I thought there could have been so much more done with that scene. I thought because I thought maybe the crowd was gonna maybe like go against them. I
Richard
don't,
Ramirez, Night Stalker him, you know?
yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of wanted that's how I was feeling at the time. I'd have to really rethink it if I like really thought about it, but I felt like I wanted more. I felt like that could have been the climax instead of what happened because when I look back, I'm like the climax is fine, but the people coming against them could have been a great real ending, I thought, because then you kind of bring in the whole circle of him killing people as the Nazi and the Jewish, like all that stuff. Like I felt like that could have been a real powerful moment of the
sure,
of everybody taking back and going against them. I know. Again, that's just
sure. No, and I agree with that. And that actually kind of plays into my original point about the premise of this movie, how there's just so many things that they tried to incorporate with that. The ending, I think, could have been along the lines of what you're talking about. Like if that would have been the ending of the movie, I don't think anybody would have been like, "Oh, this movie sucked," except
no.
for the fact that Dustin Hoffman wasn't involved. But to be honest,
Well,
he wasn't really
I think he
involved
would have.
in the death of the guy either way, right? So I mean, it didn't really matter at the end of the day.
I think you would have to rewrite it somehow. And again, I don't have all these answers off the top of my head, but um, I don't think it's that important because I agree with you. He was never. It was never. He was always by accident part of this film. So in a way, if you think about it, story wise, you don't need him to be the catalyst of the ending because the guy's history was the Jews and him killing the Jews. So, like, if the crowd ended up killing him and then maybe he was the final blow or something like that, like, there's a way where that still works because the only thing he really had against this guy was the fact that he killed his brother, but he wasn't even that close with his brother.
Sure. But I
Like,
mean,
yeah, I don't know. Again, I
I
would process this more, but
my favorite thing about this film is the fact that they incorporated a marathon runner, whether it was with some image or him running or running away from the bad guys at the end. Um, and the only reason why he was able to escape was because of his endurance. And it's the title of the film. Like for me, it's really, almost like an Indiana Jones, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like if Indiana Jones wasn't around, things would have still progressed the way they did, and would have
sure.
played out in that movie. I think the same thing would have happened in this movie. I think this guy would have ultimately gone to the bank and gone to this safety deposit box and gotten his diamonds, and whether people would have saw him or not, I think it would have probably happened
It's
at
interesting.
some thing, you know what I mean? But I mean, the good part about this movie, at least they stuck with the title and actually ran that through the story itself. I mean, I have a lot of positives about the movie. However, I can't really kind of pin it down, like what I
Well,
really feel positive about this movie.
let me add to what you just said because this was actually again one of my positives of the film was what I think they did very right about this film was the character development. And this movie, like you're saying, these are little things like in the beginning of the movie, he's running and he's training, he wants to be a marathon guy, and he's a history major, and he has this dad issue. But then the story kind of prolongs. Now, I agree with you 100%. We should not be getting into the story after 45 minutes.
Right.
Like, that should be 20 minutes
Like
minimum.
dad, brother, me,
Yeah. And I
Nazis,
felt like they could have milked the dad stuff more.
girlfriend.
Yeah,
Like you could have done all of that like really quick,
yeah.
like
It,
15-20 minutes.
it could have been tighter, could have been sure. But with with the traits though, what this movie did very well is all this buildup of who he is as a person, all this pans out in this movie. So the fact that he, like you're saying, and he mentions it, like, oh, being part of like when you're a marathon person, you learn to endure pain. You just have to continue to go. Like that's brilliant writing because
Right.
there's a huge payoff at the end when he's actually getting tortured. He knows how to deal with pain, right? And like that super pays off.
Right.
And then even like dealing with his relationship with this girl, he learns to endure with pain. Like they wrote it so perfectly because he's so mentally tough. And yeah, that stuff I just loved. I think they did an excellent job on that. The character itself is A+ written, I think.
So
I
I
feel
think
like
the question for Drew is, does
I
it
feel
hold up? He's a 70s guy.
Does it hold up?
Does it hold up nowadays?
I think so for sure, and I think so for a few reasons. I think that, well, first of all, I think, kind of like what you said earlier, no Nazi is the bad guy, especially like a undercover Nazi.
yeah.
That always makes a good movie. But in particular, like, this is not to jump into politics, but like with the relevancy of things going on in the world around us right now, and sort of, we're reading about a rise in anti-Semitism and all of the things that are going on geopolitically at this moment. It shows that a conflict that happened in the 30s and 40s that was, as we talked about earlier, still super relevant in the 1970s
Good point. I like that.
is 50 years after this movie was made, still, like, it's still in the public consciousness. It's still driving conflict. It's still driving strife around the world. And so I think that through line of it makes it, like, topically still very relevant.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I 100% think this movie does hold up with the caveat of you to kind of like even Pete's initial reaction of this. Like you have to understand this film was made in the 70s. What does that mean? They drag stuff out a little bit more. They like filmmaking, I agree, is more nuanced today where we cut to the chase faster. And some people will say, oh, that's a bad thing. Some people will say it's a great thing. I'm all about does like does every scene have a point? And then again, is this film cut to on the editing side? Is every scene maximized? Because there's some scenes, and again, this movie, I think there's a lot of times where I'm just like, all right, why are we here? And then even after the fact, I'm like, yeah, I didn't need 10 minutes of that scene because there's no payoff of it. And again, when you have a perfectly constructed film, it's all tied in together and it moves along and you don't question these things. You don't think. When you're in a great film, you don't think. And well, you don't think till after. I guess the best point. But because the movie keeps going and going and going, you have to pay attention, you have to be in it because then you might lose something. But in a slow film or a non highly driven film, when there's pauses, then you start thinking and then but because you have time, like that's a bad thing. Like we talked about Pete, what film did we just talk about? Eileen? Was it Eileen or
Eileen.
where there was just so much time where you're just like, what, why did that happen?
Doing? Yeah.
And there's no
What are we
payoff,
doing?
and you're just like, I don't understand why this was all there. And Eileen tried to be like a 70s film, I felt, but it didn't execute. Where this film executed, and again, the action drove it, and then the premise, everything always starts with a good premise. And this film has an excellent premise, and that's why this movie holds up. I think, and again, I'm going to move right into should this movie be movie made today and who should star in it. I'll start with that. I'll let you guys talk about who should star in it, but I
Well,
absolutely think this movie should be started a remade today.
well, can I make a quick point about what you guys were just talking about? And that like, when I say like this movie isn't like in the movies of the 70s aren't I think that that was a very experimental time in filmmaking, and I think it was vital
100%.
to what we actually appreciate today as filmmaking. I just think that
You
there's
wouldn't have Tarantino
No, but I think there's just been this evolution of filmmaking that gives you certain aspects that grips you and actually engages you initially. Um, I think where this movie failed, I think it did a service for what we love today, and that's all I want to say about it. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
knocking this film or movies of the 70s, but I will say that standing on the shoulders of giants is what the movies of the 70s did, because there was so much experimentation that sort of went on at that
Right.
time.
And
Um,
again, to your
and I
point,
can pick it apart all day as somebody from 2020.
necessary experimentation, right?
Right.
So I mean, let's move right into it, right? Contemporary comparison. Like, what movie do you guys think, for our audience?
Yeah, this was tough.
It's really hard.
I have a couple ideas,
I
but
have one idea, and I couldn't even
let's go to Drew. Let's go to Drew first, then we'll go to you.
get Drew.
This is a very obvious and like maybe clumsy because of how obvious it is. We're talking undercover Nazis. We're talking discovering them later on. The one that kind of struck me and leapt out to me is a film from, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago. Remember? I don't know if you guys ever saw that, with Christopher Plummer and Martin Landau.
Remember? No, that's not the movie name.
I think so.
I know what movie you're talking about.
Hold on.
I think
Remember?
I'm almost positive it's called Remember.
I'm gonna write it down because I will go and watch it immediately.
Remember Me?
No. Christopher Plummer, yeah.
A Walk to Remember, starring Mandy Moore and Shane West?
Yeah.
Remember the Titans? Oh no, it is called Remember.
Oh, remember. Well,
It's got anyway.
Oh, you're right. It's
an older
streaming on
Christopher
Max now,
Plummer.
guys. It's streaming on Max now, so you can check it. 7.5 rating. Wow, okay.
It's a great
Adam?
film. And so it's like obviously much later in time. It's from a few years ago. Much older men, but of that era, and
True. Good job, by the way. Great job.
An older guy struggling with kind of his memory, comes across somebody that was there and killed his family essentially in Auschwitz.
It's on Max now, guys. Check it out. I'm gonna check it out.
It's, if you haven't seen it, it's awesome.
On Max.
7.5. Yeah, it's on Max.
7.5 is a definite watch.
52 on Metascore, which is not so good, but disregard that.
It's really good. You should check it out. Anyway, this movie reminds me of that.
Okay.
Pete, what do you got in terms of what is reminding you?
I got the same vibe from the movie Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. Like, there was just this element of like, we didn't really know what was the truth and what wasn't at moments, but then you kind of knew because it was a movie from the 70s, but still it kind of gave you a vibe of like Spy Game, where like there was something kind of going on around Dustin Hoffman's world.
Yeah.
And it was bigger than anything he'd possibly imagined. And even once he got involved in it, that still didn't even scratch the surface.
Yeah.
I feel like it was like a spy game, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
I could see that.
It was tough to nail down.
It is. There's not a ton of movies. I got two movies that I would say. My first one that I thought of was geez, why just forget it? Holy crap. The first movie I thought of was The Fugitive. Right? And so it's you kind of have like three different elements. You have the enemy, you have Harrison Ford, and then you also have like the people you think is on your side. So right, like, so Fugitive had the sheriff's department. Go ahead.
I'm going to make fun of you because you made fun of me last week. The Fugitive is closer chronologically in time to this movie than it is to us today. It's like 30 years old. Yeah. But anyway, but you're not wrong. Continue. I was
30 years old
about The Fugitive too.
Yeah.
Had to be nice.
So I definitely thought The Fugitive, where it's like a guy trying, you don't know, you really don't trust him the whole time, being Dustin Hoffman. Like, you really don't know if he's fully innocent. You really don't know. But then his brother, you definitely don't trust Roy Schneider. But then you still have this other element of, the Nazis and all that stuff. So you just don't really know who you're trusting. So I felt a little bit of that in it. And then the new one, Pete kind of said it earlier, but Enemy of the State, where again, multiple factions. That's probably the newer contemporary one, where you're just you think a guy is innocent, but at the same time, you don't know. But then it's fishy, and it's like, man, you're just along for the ride. And Enemy of the State, I feel is probably maybe a better comp because it's just that
Yeah.
kind of action packed at the end. But yeah, those are two good comps at the end of the day.
I
So
will argue that, there was an innocence to Dustin Hoffman's character throughout. I never had a sneaking suspicion about him at all through any of it. I never thought that he was anything other than what he portrayed, which was an innocent bystander in this wrapped up sort of
yeah,
thing.
I
Just
agree.
because his
And that's
brother and his
I
dad were
don't disagree
involved,
with you, but I guess today,
he was innocent through the whole thing.
back then, I agree with you, right? Like if we watched this in the 70s, you'd probably think that. Now today, because movies have now flipped those scripts because they're redoing stuff. Now today, you're just like, wait, is Dustin Hoffman somehow like you?
the Kaiser Soze.
Yeah, Kaiser Soze type thing. You just kind of always everything's possible nowadays. And I think again, that's the brilliance of writing today is nobody's safe. And yeah,
To your point, Pete, about him seeming innocent and
Yeah.
like almost childlike, the restaurant scene is
Yeah.
amazing. He gets emasculated by the waiter,
Oh, he's
by
like
his
a kid.
by his like so hard by his brother, and obviously his brother has an ulterior motive that unveils itself later. But like,
Right.
he looks like a 6-year-old in
He
that
looks
scene.
he looked like a 6-year-old,
yeah.
100%. He went from being somebody that was challenging his professor
Yeah,
It's
and
like
being
going to dinner with
somebody
my brother. You know
like
what I mean? Like I told you.
intellectually, like he was somebody who was actually like, okay, you can do
yeah.
something, you can be something. And then he got thrown in this. You're absolutely right.
By
Yeah,
the way,
he
Roy
turned into a
Schneider,
child.
Roy Schneider, just so good, man. Like
I love him.
I wanted him more in
So
this movie, but you
how
can't.
ripped
But
was he?
Oh my god,
yeah,
Dude, he was like,
I
those
literally
those
like I
push-ups
was
he was
like
doing.
I should be doing that every morning. Like, why aren't I doing that every
yeah,
morning?
I
Probably
should
because
do push-ups against the bed.
I've always been a big Roy Schneider fan, whether it's Blue Thunder or
I love.
Jaws. Like, I don't
I
know.
agree. I would have liked him. Part of the thing, this movie would have been better. We talked about how slow it was for the first one. If there had been more of him, more of developing
Yeah,
the character earlier on,
Yeah,
I don't think we have any of those complaints
I
because
think you
he's
start the
I think you're
movie.
right.
If I
I
was
think
to
you're
rewrite this,
100% right.
I would start the movie with him on sort of a mission. I
yeah.
have to rethink it like
He,
largely, but off the top of my head, I felt like seeing him in action, so you know how badass he is.
right,
I felt like that would be an awesome setup, and then that's what leads into like where we are because
right.
Dustin Hoffman, like he is who he is, right? And he's just he's a runner, and but Roy Schneider is like this beast, and even everybody's like, this guy's a killer. Like, I want to see how powerful he is in the beginning because that just one that would grab my attention, and then you set up this whole plot of the Nazis and all that. Like maybe
Like
he's trading. I don't know. I
he's like an
have to
interesting.
really think about it, but
He's an interesting juxtaposition with 70s James Bond Roger Moore,
yeah,
who was like smarmy and like charming or whatever, but like kind of soft, kind of like. And Scheider's like the spy that Bond wants to be. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of a
totally.
dick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, and he's perfectly juxtaposed against Dustin Hoffman because they even have a great scene when they first meet. Really, and he's just like, hey, you're this like hyper liberal academic, and he's basically like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. He's like, I'm a fucking action star, like that's a great comparison, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't
When
know.
he
It
shows
worked.
up
I
at
thought that
his
worked.
when he shows up his apartment, like his apartment was a hovel.
Yeah,
I mean, we get it. You're a student, dude, but come on.
yeah. How old is
think that's the
How
word
old
he
is
used,
Dustin?
actually.
That's the crazy thing. I don't know how old he's supposed to be playing, but he
Oh,
was
how old was Dustin Hoffman
at
in
least
that
30
film?
in this.
He looked 35
Yeah,
in the movie.
he was at least 30.
Yeah. You know,
76. Dustin Hoffman was born in 37. I mean, he's 40 years old.
he
So,
was
okay,
born 37, was he?
He was born in 37.
he's born in 37. So, the movie was made in 76.
He's
So, he's
40.
No way,
30.
he's almost 100 years old.
No, he's 35. 36, 37.
No, but now there's no way Dustin Hoffman's almost 100. He was
He's
born in 37.
he's 85. Yeah. Dustin Hoffman's old.
Stop. Is that for real?
Yeah.
Jesus. All right. Well,
Anyway.
in future episode, let's give a
Yeah, way to
Dustin
ruin this
Hoffman.
podcast, Pete, by that revelation.
Jesus.
Anyway, so let's move on to the next category. Should this movie be remade today, and then who should star in it, if you believe it should be made? I'm gonna start with Drew. Drew, what do you got?
I do believe it should be remade. I would like to see some updates, like either changing some of the conceit of the espionage to something more modern. Although, like we said, we love Nazis. We don't love Nazis. That's a terrible sound clip. We really enjoy what they bring in terms of being evil characters in movies.
Drew
And
loves
Well, to your point, this movie I think has to be made in the time period. So
but
this
with modern filmmaking and
this has to be a
better
70s
fights for Peter.
film. Yeah, if you're making it, you have to make it a 70s film because all the Nazis are dead now.
Well, the new Top Gun wasn't about Russians, right?
Right.
It
No,
had to be
You could
for-
transfer.
well, if you change the topic though, so you're talking about a 100% different thing. But if you made it about the Nazis, then you have to keep it in the 70s. You just change the time period though. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
So,
maybe.
who should do it? This was hard.
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Roy
and I don't know.
Scheider, who would you have him be?
Oh, I was gonna go Dustin Hoffman. I didn't even
Oh,
think.
who would you have Dustin Hoffman be?
I don't know whether it's because he runs in this other movie, and he kind of, I don't know. To me, I would go Bradley Cooper.
Well, he's too old. He's too old.
Dustin
No,
Hoffman is
no.
35.
He's as old as
It's supposed to be a
Dustin
college
Hoffman,
student.
apparently.
It's supposed to be a college student. So
All right, so younger.
I would go Zac Efron, to be honest, especially after watching him in Iron Claw. I'd go Zac Efron, like a guy that has the physical aspects. Like you want to make him a runner. Like I feel like Zac Efron can handle that.
I was thinking more of a Taron Egerton.
Oh yeah, I would do that too. I would do that. He's got the physical aspect of it.
Even a Barry Keoghan would crush that role.
Ooh, I like that.
I like that. If he could pull off an American, I really like that one.
He would
I'd
totally
go with that.
like a Barry Keoghan.
Yeah, I'd go Barry Keoghan for sure.
Because this role that Dustin Hoffman, he could have easily been a young Tom Cruise or an Al Pacino in that time period, like from that time.
Could have been.
I saw moments in Dustin Hoffman's performance where I saw young Pacino,
Tom Cruise is too young.
Godfather. You know what I mean? Like I saw like some real performances where they were very similar to Al Pacino, and then I saw similarities to like very young Tom Cruise. But obviously, if you recast it, it wouldn't be proper. But yeah, Barry Keoghan would be good.
I would be open to that. I like that.
Roy Scheider, maybe John Hamm.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
I was thinking George Clooney, but John Hamm I think is better.
But I'll say this: both those guys are really old. Like if this movie was made,
They have to be old. Roy Scheider's old.
not in that movie, he's like 40.
Dude, that's old.
John
No,
Hamm. Just throw some Botox. John Hamm.
I'm with you in terms of like the personality fits. I'm gonna go with.
Dude, George Clooney would have crushed that role right now.
No, I know. I just feel like again, if you're going Barry Keoghan and he's his brother, you have to go 10 years. So you need somebody 30-ish to 35, 40 max. And you're gonna go, I'd go with maybe like a James Marsden X-Men,
Like an X-Men dude, yeah.
or James who's Professor X? James, that guy.
That's his name, isn't it? James Marsden.
No, he was a Cyclops, but the
Oh,
Professor X, James Marsalis, or
he was in Split.
yeah, that guy.
McAvoy.
James McAvoy, yeah.
McAvoy, yeah, I could see that. I
I
could
would
see
go
that.
him. I
Yeah.
could go him. Again, yeah, I didn't put a ton of thought into the Roy Schneider role, but um
I
yeah,
like I like the Barry Keoghan call. That's good.
I like Barry Keoghan. I think he definitely make this work.
Thank you, Point Peter.
You know what else after watching uh Iron Claw, we just watched Iron Claw. Jeremy Allen White, man. I feel like this guy definitely could have crushed that role. Um
Scheider or Hoffman's role?
Hoffman's role. He definitely could have. I mean, I think he's late 20s, early 30s, but I think this guy I think is brilliant, and I think this guy's got a bright future. I could easily seen him in that role. You can grow his hair out long, you can cut it short. He's got the physical element to it, and just the acting chops. Like, I mean, this guy's got it. I, I could see him in that role too.
One of the things that I loved about this film, and that's all I'll say, and I know we got to wrap up, but I loved that this movie was produced by Robert Evans, who was also the executive behind
Yeah,
all of the Godfather movies and Chinatown, and
yeah.
like the fact that he was behind this movie, and because of what I saw in that
Offer,
series, and so you got to
offer,
do no, what's the
the offer.
oh, The Offer. Thank you.
Yeah,
The Offer was great.
said it 7 times. Just
Well, I didn't hear you
yeah,
because
that's why
you
I yelled it the last
don't
time.
enunciate properly.
Said the
But
offer, the offer.
in The Offer, you get to
Have
see who
Wolves
he
in it.
was and what his, value was to
He's great. He's great.
the 70s in filmmaking. And the fact that he was behind this movie, um, I just appreciated it even more than my critique of it today. I mean, I love this movie for my own reasons. Um, but I love that he was a part of it. I think that's something that needs to be said that, Robert Evans was a part of this and he's an icon.
Well, and we talked about in the beginning of the film. This was a critically successful film, a commercial successfully film. Um, not it wasn't Star Wars by any stretch of the imagination, but this film is this film's what makes studios go. And again, budget 5 million, made 20. That's 4 times. That's 4x. That's a
I'm su-
solid return.
I'm surprised this film isn't in the like the lexicon, American lexicon more.
I would
Like
agree with that. Yeah.
it's not like you think 70s, you think Taxi Driver and obviously The Godfathers, you think Star Wars. Like these are like 3 stars. Laurence Olivier was not at the height of his career, but he was still
Oh,
dining
he's
out.
definitely in. Oh, so fun fact. Apparently he did this movie because he was dying of cancer, and he took this movie so that the money could go to his family. He wanted to take care of
Oh,
his family.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
well,
he was
to
literally
be
dying of
honest, this
cancer.
was this was my admittedly, I've never really I know that he is an icon and I know that he's a pillar in the acting world and in cinema. I'd never seen anything that he's done until this movie.
Hmm.
This is my first
What?
Laurence Olivier experience of my
All right,
life.
so we'll watch his main film's what?
Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia. We need to watch that one. I started to watch that one again. I could watch that one again. So we'll
I've
definitely put that
never
on.
seen him perform, and I've always heard about him
He's the actor. Yeah, and he was
iconically,
in
right?
was he in Cleopatra too, I think? I don't know. I'm
He
trying
was
to fish to
in,
Drew
he
a
was
little
in
bit.
some old like early
Yeah,
noirs.
Drew would know.
I'll look it up. I was trying to pitch to you guys so you guys could look it up, but apparently
I'm
nobody.
looking it up right now. He was
Oh,
in
okay.
some old noirs. He was in like a 70s Dracula.
Supposed to be like the best, right? Like he was like the pinnacle of acting, no?
For
Yes,
sure. Yeah.
arguably considered like one of the greatest actors of all
But
time.
they'd say like Lawrence of Olivier because he was Lawrence of Arabia, no? Like it was a thing. He was
No,
like the
he
biggest shit.
is.
A lot of Shakespeare. He was like in Othello.
He's in Rebecca, which is
That's
the
what I was thinking.
Alfred Hitchcock film. I mean, he's the guy.
Well,
So
you two
Clash
are
of
the
the Titans.
old.
He was in Clash of the Titans. No, you've
crazy.
seen him before.
He did he did all of the anything that was Shakespeare. Henry V, Hamlet,
Yes,
Richard III,
he is.
Othello.
He is the Hamlet, or I'm sorry,
Oh,
the
Spartacus.
Spartacus. Yes,
Spartacus was the
Spartacus.
big one,
Kirk
right?
Douglas.
With Kirk Douglas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spartacus.
But yeah, no, he's great. All right, well let's wrap this up. I don't want to carry this too long. But yeah, ultimately, guys, again, if you're good with 70s film, this is a solid 70s film. This is again, Enemy of the State, The Fugitive, what were your guys' comp? There's another one.
I did remember.
I did remember, right.
No, not I did. Like I chose
Just
remember.
remember with the movie.
Right. I did
But,
remember. I
uh,
did remember.
but yeah, if you're into those films, check this out. It's definitely a 70s film, but there's a lot of greatness in this film, and it's definitely worth checking out. It's on Paramount Plus, also
Doing our
Amazon
list.
Prime.
We're doing our list.
We're gonna do that. Yes, we're gonna do it right now.
But there's also value in watching a movie that gives you ideas about what potential is. Like, because when you watch this movie, I really do see like a million things that you could do as a filmmaker. So this is like one of those movies, if you're just starting out in filmmaking, you're like, what can I watch to be inspired? I would watch this movie because it actually tells you a
I love
lot
that. I
about
love
what
it.
you can do.
Yeah. So to Drew's point, let's jump into before we wrap up
Oh
our
yeah.
top 5 Dustin Hoffman films. And Drew, we'll go to you first
Yeah,
since
this
you
could be
brought it
bad.
up. Drew, what
We're,
do you got? Top
we're
5 Dustin
starting, we're starting at 5, right?
Right, starting
Hoffman,
five.
5. And
This
then
is
we'll
one that
rotate.
was
Everybody gives their 5 and we'll roll down.
for my early. I can't remember if it was my childhood or teens, like whatever. I mean, teenage, but yeah. I really like Wag the Dog, and I
Oh,
liked.
that's a good one. Yeah.
I thought it was funny, political, and I thought Dustin Hoffman in it was great.
Okay.
Awesome. Pete, what do you have for number 5?
Number 5, I put The Graduate, just because
Oh, geez. Wow.
yeah, it's how we were introduced to him.
Have you
And
actually seen The Graduate or no?
no, I have seen it.
Okay.
And it's fine. It's an introduction to Dustin Hoffman, so it has to be on the list.
Yeah, for sure. I went with a contemporary film only because that's typically what you do with number 5. I went with Meet the Fockers. And the reason why I chose that one is this is his real comedic role. And, every other film is kind of serious or there's slight humor, but Meet the Fockers, like he was hilarious in it. And he had a very distinct character. And yeah, man, this is definitely a stretch for him. And again, he really hadn't been prevalent in films for a while. So that's why I chose Meet the Fockers for number 5. And then I'll go to number 4 and then we'll back around. We'll do Snake guys.
Snake it.
My number 4 is
Justin.
probably my number favorite film of him, but you can't rank this any higher just because you probably get murdered. But is Hook. And I loved him as Captain Hook. He was very different than any other film he'd ever been in. And I just love Hook. I mean, you guys don't have to sell me on Hook. But I know this is not necessarily his Academy Award winning performances, which is why it's number 4. But
I knew one of you was going to choose Hook, and I figured one
Yeah.
of you idiots would choose it as number 1.
Well, I chose it 4. A lot of restraint. I probably wanted to rate it number 4, or no, I'm sorry, number 1, but a lot of restraint, and I reluctantly moved it to number 4.
All right, my number 4. I picked Sleepers, because it was such a different role for him, and that movie is one of the more powerful films I think I've ever seen in my life, and it really does rip at your heartstrings. And he comes in as this bumbling idiot of a lawyer, and he does it to perfection. And I thought his acting in this film was something I've never really seen from him before. So that's my number 4, Sleepers.
Interesting. Drew, what do you got?
Sleepers is a great film. It was borderline on my list, so I will choose something else so that we hopefully can talk about different ones.
No, no, no.
No.
I agree. It's
mean,
okay
we're
that
not,
we're agreement.
we're not going for points, but I love Sleepers.
I'm winning, by the way.
What's that?
I'm winning, by the way.
You are for sure. Until you say Hook. Kramer versus Kramer. And I get it, it's old, like blah blah blah. But it is, I mean,
It's overturned.
Won a million Academy Awards, and it really is like a tour de force between him and Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep really starting to find her stride.
Right.
And I think it's a really good film.
I definitely got to watch the movie again. What do you got for number 3?
Number 3, I have Stranger Than Fiction, more contemporary one.
Oh yeah,
Will Ferrell, kind of like the voice in Will, and really good performance by Will Ferrell and kind of everybody in there. And he's sort of the elder statesman of that film, and it's just a really good movie.
That was Will Ferrell's like real first like dramatic role, no?
Yeah.
It came out of like nowhere.
Yeah, and he's good at it.
It was great. Number 3, I put Rain Man. Is my number 3. Because how do you do that role?
he won an Oscar. You won an Oscar, right?
Yeah, he won an Oscar. It was amazing. So that's Rain Man, number 3.
I don't think you really need to explain when he wins the Oscar.
Oh, I have to explain why he's good in Rain Man.
Yeah, no, I mean that was my number 3 as well. For the exact same reason. He made the role not just important but entertaining too. Like we still, like, I still quote from that movie today, like excellent role. Him and Tom Cruise obviously just crush it.
Yeah, I still take handfuls of matches and throw them on the ground and go 575.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I do.
Definitely 575
all day.
Definitely.
My number 2 is The Graduate. I agree with, was it Pete that put it number 5? Yeah, it's just his introduction. Isn't necessarily his best role? No, but it's his most important role, because this is a film that really launched him into a different stratosphere, and he gets these roles that we talk about, Marathon Man, amongst others, that makes him one of the preeminent actors of the 70s. So I put The Graduate there.
And beyond, right?
Look, I don't like to sugarcoat things. I don't think it's his most amazing role. Again, I think Rain Man is a way better acting job, but The Graduate you have to include, because
that was your number 2, Graduate.
Yeah.
Drew, what's your number 2?
My number 2, I put Rain Man at 2. I will reiterate that one.
Yeah, no argument there.
And the name itself, the title of the film itself, is something that people say to other people. Like, it is part of the American, like, shared experience.
And I don't know if there's anybody else that can really do the role the way he did it. I mean, again, it's part of his personality too. Like, there's nobody that has that screen presence, but then also can just nail the role. Like, again,
the only comp would be like a Leo in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Like,
yeah, but still, Leo still has a bigger personality. Like,
yes, but it was a different person. But
yeah,
to be that into a role and to portray it 100% authentically, I think Leo and Dustin, I think, are.
I agree with that. I don't think Leo could do what he did, but I agree with you.
Not to give him too much shine, but Barry Keoghan.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Ben
Way to bring it.
Stiller in Tropic Thunder.
You never go full.
Good job, Pete. That way to
Never
crush.
gets old. That's just is the best.
All right, so
My number
everybody
two.
number two?
Yeah, my number two is Tootsie because it's his most iconic role. Um, and it's
Yeah.
weird that it's number two as his most iconic
Yeah,
role.
what's your number one then?
However, my number one is beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. Are you asking me what my number one
Yeah,
is?
I am because
Oh, number one is Hook, obviously.
you did do it.
Hook, I did it.
You went
I
with
did
you
it.
went for it.
Why? Why did I do it? Why did I do it? Because who can
Because I'm James Hook.
portray Captain Hook in this way and actually have it be believable? And you're with him and you're along with that journey. Nobody else could have pulled off Captain Hook the way Dustin Hoffman did. I challenge you to tell me who would have done a good enough job.
You know what my only issue with him as James Hook
Nah,
was?
it's his number one. It's his number one role of
It
all
was
time.
not performance, by the way. What was my main issue with? You might actually know this, Pete. What was my main issue?
That the film is terrible.
No.
It's not terrible. It's like one of the best movies
Drew,
ever.
that's
What are you talking about?
Drew, that's so far from the truth. But what's
True.
the actual issue with Dustin Hoffman as Hook?
I don't know. He's in a rented wig.
It's a physical element to him.
He's
With the
tiny.
teeth?
Yeah, he's tiny. He's 5'3", I think, 5'4".
In a rented wig from Party City.
Yeah.
He
It was polka dots in
did
Arcadia.
an absolutely flawless
We
job
can shout out
at a role.
Polka
that
dots
was
who actually
iconic.
costumed several of my.
This is like we just talked about Wonka and stepping into a role that is already established and being able to pull it off.
I
is
agree with you, Pete. Don't get
impossible.
bullied. Don't get bullied by Drew here. Drew's
Listen,
so wrong.
I'm not trying to bully you guys.
Nobody can walk into Captain Hook and pull it off the way Dustin Hoffman did.
But
He crushed.
Drew,
Hook.
who would you have put in?
Let me guess.
want to
Our
replace-
next place, Jumanji will be your number one. Say it again.
No, Drew. Who would you like if you're so against,
Hook.
way as Hook? Who would you have put?
As my number one?
No, not as your number one. Like
Oh no, Dustin
Dustin
Hoffman
Hoffman as Hook.
Dustin Hoffman did a good job.
This is off the script,
I
Drew.
just hate the movie.
Yeah,
Drew,
he
this
did-
is off
he
the
did-
script. Who
he does
would
a good
you
job. He
who would
crushed.
you want as Hook? Like who would you think would have done better in that time period, 1991?
If I wanted that movie, if I wanted to care about that movie, who do I
If
think?
you want,
If you want to
yeah,
care
we're
about
we're getting a
movie,
deeper.
it was so good. He did such a good job.
All right, I'm gonna let you think about
Robin
that.
Williams.
So did Robin Williams do a good job.
Robin
He did a
Williams
good
was
job.
Hook, or Robin Williams was Peter Pan.
True. Okay.
Yes. Damn it.
Hey,
Right.
keep thinking about it. I'm gonna give you my number one, Drew, and then we'll go to you.
There we go.
My number one was Tootsie. Pete kind of already nailed it. So what Dustin Hoffman, I think what ultimately we realized about Dustin Hoffman is he's not Robert Redford. He's not
He's versatile.
he's versatile, but he's not the action star. But he's got personality, he's got quirkiness, he's funny. And I think Tootsie kind of really played into Dustin Hoffman's strengths, which is he's got some comedy to him. He's got again, he can just act, he can be different. And Tootsie is just a different film, especially at that time. It was a very bold
At the time, that was an
very
unheard
bold
of film.
yeah, very bold role, and he nailed it. But it's good. Like I watched Tootsie probably 5-6 years ago,
It's
and
amazing.
the movie holds up, and it's just a good film.
People
And-
were so surprised that a man would dress up as a woman when they'd been doing it for centuries,
Yeah,
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, because men were the only actors
yeah.
ever. They would play all the women roles, and then like we finally see Tootsie, and it was like this big deal. It was so controversial.
He was still a man though, right? Like
America's so dumb sometimes.
he was still a man, and he still wanted a woman, and that's what ultimately drove him to do this. And so again, I think the script was great, and I
Yeah.
think that's what makes this movie work. Like again, it didn't get into politics. It was just like the script was good, the characters worked. Like you break down Tootsie, it all the necessary character aspects of it play out, and it's in anatomy of a story. Like this movie's well studied when it comes to screenplays. So
Sure.
Drew,
Number one, dog.
I mean, it is weirdly timed given the movie that we watched last week. It is the same number one that I had last week. It's All the President's Men.
Yeah.
Yep. Not Sphere.
No argument.
Yeah, Sphere. It was
Sphere
close.
was good. Sphere was good.
One of the notable ones that Sphere was good.
Sphere was good. I loved it.
Notable ones that I had to leave off was Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah.
Or Outbreak.
I loved Outbreak.
Outbreak was great.
It was good in Outbreak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not as good as Hook, but pretty good.
I know for me, like I just tried to
Michael Crichton too.
Think so.
Yes.
Think so,
100%.
right?
Yeah. I just tried to choose a diverse set of movies for him because again, you're talking Dustin Hoffman, he's multiple Oscar winner. Like this guy knows that, right? We're not talking about some slouch. And so for me, I just try to choose different roles versus again, like I think in the 70s, you can pick any of those films and those are his top, right? Like again, Marathon Man, he was great in All the President's Men, The Graduate,
Kramer
versus Kramer. Like he's great in all those films. So I just try to pick diversity in films. But again,
I picked the best one, which was Hook. So there you go.
Yeah. Or pick Hook number one. But friends and family, comment below what you think. We'd like to hear your lists.
I think if people actually commented, they would say Hook would be their favorite Dustin Hoffman film.
Come on, people.
Come on, people.
Do you agree with Drew? Do you agree with Pete? Guys, rip them apart. I want to hear you rip my brother apart. He needs to be humbled. So please trash him, trash his picks. But guys, thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate it. Our next film, guys. So this is now you've seen two. We want to see our third one. And our next film is going to be a classic John Wayne film, which is El Dorado. And you can find that on Amazon Prime. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch this with us. Directed by one of my favorite directors, one of my inspirations is Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks,
great.
Like literally, he directs all different types of films.
Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, he directs noir. He directs comedies, love film. Like he's one of the most diverse directors of all time, which is why I want to watch this film. I saw this movie so long ago, but I couldn't tell you about it.
Never seen it. John Wayne is a big gap in my movie watching.
Which is why we're watching
El Dorado.
El Dorado, yeah. So we're gonna watch El Dorado again. You can watch it Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. So check it out. That's gonna be our next film we're gonna review. Again, starring John Wayne, amongst others. It's an excellent film, highly rated. So please join us for that. Again, we got two other podcasts, guys. Make sure you catch us. We have our movie news, which we break down all the upcoming news every week. Next week, we got a big spoiler. Beverly Hills 4 is coming out, so we're going to talk about that. And our other series is just our regular movie reviews. We're going to talk about Wonka.
Just reviewed Wonka, which is like the best.
Yeah. And then next week, what's the big movie next week, Pete?
Aquaman.
Aquaman, yeah. We got Aquaman. We got Ferrari with Michael Mann.
Ferrari, yeah.
Ton of movies. Family Plan, which is on Apple Plus. So tons of stuff, guys. Thank you for joining us. Comment below, subscribe.
Okay,
thank you, Drew, for joining us as well. And we'll catch you again. And that, fellas, that is a cut. Thanks, guys.